long history in this country of creating, organizations that sound like they're doing good, but actually they do the opposite of the things they're named after.
Very much,
Uh,
very
so
much.
anytime I see a Save the Children thing and it's connected to the government, I'm like, well, then probably the opposite. Just in my experience with pattern recognition and the evils that our government carries out. So, okay, let's go back then to Beau Biden. And if you could walk us through that timeline, I don't know, where's a good place to start? Would it be him turning down running for Senate, or is there we go back earlier?
I think we unfortunately have to go back earlier, but
Yeah.
it won't take long.
No, yeah,
But
go
I
for it.
think there's a huge portion of the story, which I kind of added like an addendum to that video, because there is a very important kind of origin story
Mm.
that's, I think, necessary for people to really grasp. So if we go back to 1987, which seems like a long time, uh, Beau Biden would have been graduating from a private high school, Catholic school in northern Delaware in Claymont called Archmere Academy.
Mm.
Hunter graduated a year later. Ashley Biden graduated there in 1999, and their
Mm.
father graduated there in 1961.
Wow.
And that's only important because there was a major case during Beau's time as the AG of Delaware that was tried in Delaware because the school is there. He was not part of this case, but there was a lawsuit that was filed from a 1985 graduate of Archmere Academy that alleged horrific rape by the
Mm.
teachers and reverends that worked there. And the guy won I think it was a $41 million lawsuit.
Mm.
He won for over 230 different accounts of sodomized rape and over 33 months. So he was only there for, I think, 3 years at
Wow.
the academy, which is all at the time, I think it was still an all boys. But they changed that, and I think sometime in the late 80s. But the guy he's very upstanding. And most of the kids who come from schools like that are.
Hmm.
These are private schools, cost $34,000 a year just to go. And every Biden went there. So these are prominent senators' kids and stuff like that. So they generally end up good. And the guy who sued the school for the rape, he was I think a lieutenant commander in the Navy.
Hmm.
And by all accounts, a good person, married, children, served our country, obviously. So um, he finally came forward, but he was only able to come forward against Archmere Academy because of a lawsuit that, or not lawsuit, a policy, a law that made it legal that was drafted by Beau Biden. So he pushed for this. The words that they think they used is like an opportunity window,
Hmm.
where they took away the statute of limitations for childhood rape cases for 2 years, just to see if they could dredge out whatever they could and just remove kind of a long time trauma in Delaware. And this
Wow.
was just a statewide thing that they did. And out of it was hundreds of cases that were tried and convicted.
Hmm.
And one of them, of course, was this in particular. And so he got to convict the guy. But if he graduated in 1985 and Hunter 88 and Beau in 87, there's a very high likelihood, very high. From my understanding, he had been there a while and stayed there a while afterwards because these allegations didn't come out till 2008. So he was free to, the kid didn't say anything the
Hmm.
entire time. So he likely stayed there. As far as my understanding, he stayed there for a couple of years, and it was there for at least a couple of years before. And this is also wasn't the first teacher that had been accused of something like this in that same time era. So there was another teacher that they've redacted because they settled out of court, but whoever it was took some sort of deal, probably to rat on the other guy. Um, but they no longer work there now, of course, thank goodness. And can't imagine that when Beau looks so, by the way, he looks a lot like Beau, brown hair, white skin, kind of, squarish kind of face, very
Hmm.
similar features. Um, and I read the accounts of the indictment from what the witness had claimed, which was very detailed. And he accounted that, people knew, and it was kind of like a hush hush thing. And it was obvious it was going on to a further extent than just him. And so I started thinking, I know a lot about, because I make it a passion of mine to care about sex abuse victims. It's one of the most horrific things you can do to somebody.
Hmm.
And what I've noticed is there's a cyclical nature, and there's plenty of studies. They do vary in their results, but then by and large, they all support the idea that child abuse, especially amongst men, at the young age, if you're abusing a young boy, they have a high chance of becoming a predator themselves.
Mm,
If they are not perfectly well adjusted in a lot of ways, and if just the way the cookie crumbles is unfortunate,
yeah.
they have a high chance of that happening. It's a much higher reoccurring rate, 40 times higher than it is for women. So I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about this family. We see what Hunter looks like. We see now what Ashley's like. Even their cousin Carolyn, which is mentioned in Ashley Biden's diary, she's a mess. I mean, all these kids, by every account, except for Beau, was a complete and utter disaster.
Yeah.
And same with the, obviously their father is creepy.
Oh,
He sniffs kids.
that's putting it lightly.
Yeah, a little bit, a
Yep.
little bit. I wouldn't leave him with the kid.
Nope.
And it makes me wonder, is this a cyclical abuse pattern
Yeah.
that all of them have only one thing truly in common? It's they all went to preparatory school at Archmere.
Wow. So you think
So
they
like
like
that's
exposed
important
to evil?
context.
Yeah, exposed to evil at this school. And when the car accident that the Bidens were in is well before the all that too, right? Because that's like another weird element of the grief-stricken Biden family too. They lost a mom in the car wreck, I believe,
Yeah, and a sister.
and a
They
sister.
lost their mother,
Mm,
Nelia Hunter, which is where Hunter gets his name. She's
mm.
from Scanatiels, New York, which is why he's got the Finger Lakes tattooed on his back. There's a
Oh
lot of
wow.
other allegations for why it could be the
Yeah.
tattoos on his
Well,
back,
I've
but
heard those allegations too. I mean, because I mean, for those who don't know, the rumor, the story is that there's trafficking tunnels right beneath the Finger Lakes. I don't know anything about that, the truth behind that, but we know there's tunnels around the world that do things like
yeah,
this. And we on this show talked about weird tunnels beneath insane asylums, and anything's possible. But it's also important to know that that's the context of why he might also have it, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. It's definitely important to know. But it is important also because it shows how traumatic that entire experience of losing his mom. He was only, I think, 3 years old.
Hmm.
I think Beau was maybe 4. It was very, very young. Amy was the sister that died. She was an infant. She died instantly with the mother. And that I think it was 3 weeks after that crash, or 3 days after that crash, is when Joe Biden got his sworn in for his Senate seat that he'd
Right.
always wanted. And of
From the
course, he
hospital
maintained
bed.
that. Huh? Yeah,
From
by
the
his
ho-
hospital bed. Yep.
from the hospital
That's
bed. It's
mhm.
kind of like it's a horrible image and a horrible tragedy, but it's such a weird, metaphor for a lot of the disaster that would come out of his whole career, right?
I
This
think it
man,
says that for his family too, like what
yeah.
he prioritizes.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. It's like I say this a lot, but I believe it. I think people do sell their souls to evil for some type of step up in this, fame game politics world, and it's that to me looks like that. Despite all this tragedy, here he is, and he's always, in my opinion, Joe Biden has been this. I call him like a eulogist because he always talks about grief and death, and I understand why in the context of this wreck and all this stuff, but he always uses it to his advantage, and it's kind of slimy, in my opinion.
It's extremely slimy. And now that
Yeah.
I know what I know about Beau and my understanding of things, I have less respect for him than ever.
Yeah. Oh,
And I
yeah.
didn't think that was possible.
It
I
sunk
really
even
didn't.
lower.
So,
So
mhm.
we know then this school's under investigation that these kids that they all went to, right? And you said
Yeah,
even Joe Biden went there.
Joe even went there. Yeah.
That's wild. So, and there's these crazy allegations. And then Beau Biden, just to recap, he's in charge of that law that opened up this 2-year
Hmm.
window for
The
people to
look
then,
back window. That's what it was
right,
called. The look back.
the look back
Mhm.
window, which got a lot of people prosecuted, which is hard because it's hard to prosecute victims of child rape in the courts because they don't
Very
see
hard.
children
Yeah,
as reliable witnesses. And especially with
exactly.
the time that's passed, it makes it even tougher. So it's crazy to think that they got a lot of people within that window, which is great, because those people need to be thrown away forever. So that case is broken open. He's attorney general at the time. And then where does it go from there?
Okay, so then that case that again, Beau Biden never touched that case. He was not
Hmm.
involved.
Mm.
However, there was a string of them, and I think why so many were successful is because a lot of them were kind of grouped up. They found a lot of the cases were all about the same person, which helped build their cases, but it had less necessarily perps that were put away. But they, because they'd have multiple victims, and that later wouldn't be found out until they did these cases, and then they did a few different law firms covered it, and some did class actions and some did individual cases, because a lot of people wanted to stay anonymous but still wanted to at least make their case known and make the allegation and go to court
Mm,
and all that, which I know for a lot of them was probably mentally relieving just to get it off their chest. But
yeah.
so that's 2008.